Rich Longo, and I'll be your host today. I want to thank you for joining us for another Flycast Partners presentation. Today, our presentation will be focused on what you, the audience, have been wanting to know about BMC FootPrints Service Core v12.1, presented by Flycast Partners' own Greg Gielda. Before we get started, there are a variety of people still trying to sign in and get dialed in for today's presentation. It appears, Greg, that we've definitely touched a nerve with this topic, as we have an audience that's representing most of the states of the U.S. as well as 3 territories in Canada. So I want to welcome all those of you that have taken time out of your busy days to be with us today for our presentation. Those of you that aren't familiar with Greg Gielda, Greg has been with Flycast Partners pretty much since its inception, has been responsible for literally hundreds of implementations for footprints for various different versions. He has been in the software industry for almost 2 decades and has provided ITIL consultative skills to numerous clients regarding ITIL best practices and critical success factors required for smooth implementation and operation. Before we get started, let me tell you more about Flycast Partners itself. We provide IT consulting to organizations across North America. Our clients remain ahead of the curve on technology adoption while maintaining the rock-solid principles of ITIL and practical focused projects or products. Our website is always monitored by our team of well-trained ITSM specialists. Please visit us online at www.flycastpartners.com. Feel free to reach out and call us directly at 844-FLYCAST. Our line is monitored during business hours. And for those of you that have our level 1 support, we do have after hours depending on how critical your issue is. Please give us a call if you're interested in our level 1 for footprints. We encourage you to utilize our website for researching industry white papers, training that is available from ITIL to ITSM tools, assistance with professional services, and the new ITSM Solution Finder. Now, today's presentation, folks, we are actually going to take a different approach. We really genuinely want to answer a lot of the questions that you had when you signed up. So we're going to go through some of the hottest topics that you, the audience, put in your biggest challenges. Okay, so as we get going in the presentation, I'll read them off to Greg, and Greg will try to address as many of those as he possibly can. Now, without further ado, I'm going to turn the presentation over to none other than Greg Gielda. Greg, I'm sharing the screen capabilities with you at this time. You should be seeing that.
All right, Rich. I'm not sure. I heard you, Rich, very broken up. So I'm not sure if everybody else heard you that same way, but you were very kind of stuttery when I was hearing you. So do I sound the same to you?
I did. You sound great. I did get a couple of folks chatting with me, Diane and Zach, pointing that out. And I think that my connection may have gone bad here on my headset. So I do want to apologize for that. And I'm going to try and keep it together to get us through this presentation.
All right, you try to do that. It sounds like you got some noise in the background. I'll be calling on you in a little bit to start going through some of those questions. Once I get a chance to share my desktop and start talking about footprints in general, we'll be able to dive into some of those. So hopefully everybody can hear me all right. It looks like some people said yes, but now it's good. So at least you can hear my voice clearly. Rich, it sounded like I said, you were breaking up. Okay, good. I got a message from Zach for letting me know that I sound clear, so we're okay. So we'll turn this over to Rich to get some of the questions dug out, but I want to be able to start discussing Footprints version 12. I'm going to share my desktop here. Hopefully, there we go. And now I'm going to slide over to Footprints v12. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, haven't had a chance to see it yet, that we haven't had a chance to demonstrate to individually, this is clearly not your father's footprints, right? For many of you folks who are using footprints, who have been using it in the past, this is a very different looking animal, whether you're accessing the product from the viewpoint of an agent, or whether you're accessing the product from the viewpoint of a customer looking in at the service catalog or any number of ways that you can view it. Footprints has dramatically changed. And I want to be able to make sure that we touch on what those differences are, right, as well as some of the capabilities that Footprints has. So in general, let me just do a high-level flyover of what Footprint is and really has always been, right, even in earlier versions of the product. And then we'll start talking about what Footprints no longer is, right, some of the things that have changed and some of the ways in which those things have been dramatically improved. So first things first, Footprints is and always has been a web-based solution, 100%. So that means right now I happen to be looking at Footprints through the Chrome browser. When I was looking at it for customers here, I was looking at Footprints through Internet Explorer. It doesn't really matter which browser version you use. Footprints will show up cleanly for you. You shouldn't have any issues because it's browser agnostic. So it doesn't really care which version of the browser you're using, and that includes browsers that may be on your tablet devices or iPhones or Android devices or whatever you happen to own. You have the ability to, of course, browse Footprints directly from there. It uses HTML5, so it scales quite nicely and allows you to see tickets and other information, even if using a handheld device. Because it's browser agnostic, you don't have to have a specific browser installed as long as it's newer than Internet Explorer 6. Did I just say Explorer? I didn't mean to. I meant Explorer. Internet Explorer 6. You can make sure that you use at least a newer version of a browser than that. You'll be able to support HTML5 and should be perfectly fine. Footprints is also and always has been 100% codeless. And in version 12, that is absolutely no different, right? Footprints v12 is still 100% codeless. All the administration, which we're going to talk about some in the background here as we move forward in our discussion, all of the administration that you can do in Footprints is done through a point-and-click interface. So there will not be any issues or concerns with having to learn a specific language or code to be able to make Footprints work. You don't have to even be able to spell DBA for Footprints to work because you're not working in the database setting up tables or running SQL scripts or anything like that. All of the functionality is done through point-and-click interface. And that's been one of the biggest really in Footprints, right along with one of its other key factors that still remains today, and that is the concept of a workspace. Footprints has always been built around workspaces. Version 12 is no different, only we have enhanced capability there, and we're going to talk about that as we go on. But a workspace in Footprints is really the collection of all the stuff that you need to be able to say, hey, we've got a different process that we use for managing incident requests, right, than we would have if we were managing a new change request, for example, right? If I need to manage change request type stuff, I've got different information, different details in the ticket. The tickets have a different life cycle. Workspaces in Footprints are designed to capture all the stuff you need to manage your blank process, whatever your process happens to be. So in that way, if you've got facilities work that needs to be done, you can have a workspace for that. And we're going to talk a little bit where your problem process goes.
We've lost you for whatever the reason. Now we've got you. There you go.
Wow, weird. I didn't move. So we obviously have some interesting audio challenges today. Apologies for that, guys. Am I back now, Rich? In all my glory?
You're loud and clear again. That was a little strange.
Good. Apologies. So yes, workspaces definitely are the workhorse of Footprints. They used to exist before. They still exist now. Only as we'll see, you can now have workspaces inside of workspaces, which you never used to be able to do in earlier versions of the product. So those things are kind of the core of Footprints, right? It is a codeless, web-based ITSM solution, but it's not just ITSM. 80% of the customers who use Footprints on the planet are using it for something outside of IT, and that's a Gartner statistic that you can look up. So that means they're using it to manage things that are not information technology. And that really can bring us to some of the additional questions that some of you folks had. Rich, if you'd take a look and bring up one of those questions for me, that would be great from one of our users, and we can sort of address how that works.
Absolutely. Now, we're going to start out with Laura Mickey. If I select your question today, folks, I encourage you to email me your mailing information at rich.longo@flycastpartners.com. If you give me your email information, I'm going to send you out a little small token of our appreciation on behalf of Flycast Partners. So our first one is Laura Mickey, and she actually has 3 points here. One is allow 1,100 users to track the status of their work request when submitted by administrators administrative staff. Next one is developing a workspace to capture the procurement process and incorporate notifications of certain material purchased. And last point was developing the ability to search previous and current purchases by main data fields.
You bet. Well, I'm glad that you brought that question up, Laura, and we'll definitely address those concepts. Good really segue, because we're talking about workspaces right now. And workspaces, of course, as we said in Footprints, can be for anything, right? If I want to have a project management workspace to create the tracking of the tip of the spear of a project such that I can capture information relative to it, and I don't have, full details in my workspace here, but I did capture information about my project status, my charter, my priority, who the project manager is, of course, the description of the project, but also information about who our project sponsor is, general overview so that we can link to or create specific tasks in our service desk for these projects, so that if I click create linked, notice that I can create new service requests to have people then go do the work on behalf of that project. No more listing this stuff out in a spreadsheet someplace, no more need to have separate meetings where they come back and say we're 82.3% done. Right? I can see on the ticket if you're finished with this project or not, because I've created work orders for you to go do the work. No ticky, no worky, right? No ticket, no work should be the mantra. For those of you who attended our service desk presentation in the past, or who want to, we do have one of those coming up, discussing the service desk and its role in the organization. We discuss how project work can be funneled through there. So work for projects, work for procurement, work for any kind of workspace that isn't your typical IT stuff can easily be set up, and then capture the information that's necessary to capture the official project name, perhaps the project funding method, the purpose, the scope, out of scope, assumptions, risks, any of the information that's required, including supporting attachments that might be necessary to capture for that project. Even things like particular record activity, or if you've included a link to your calendar, the ability to create appointments so that folks can be booked to do this work at a particular date and time. And Footprints does integrate with your Exchange calendar directly, so that gives you the ability to tie this out to your Exchange system and pull back calendar information so that you can schedule people for particular things at particular times. These workspaces and Footprints can be for anything. So yes, you can create procurement workspaces, project workspaces, facilities workspaces, any kind of requests that you wish to create. And because the data can be brought back and disseminated and sliced up any way you want, any of the information that's created in the system can be viewed later, right? In this case, I'm looking at all of my tickets, and I have them broken out by priority, just one of the many data fields that you can choose in Footprints. You can add as many as you'd like. You can have fields that describe all the needful information for your process. And then you can simply use Footprints to sort or group based on that information, like I've done here for priority. Or because all fields are available to me, I can gain access to and add additional columns, including things like, hey, when was the ticket last closed? Or when was this ticket opened? Or how old is the ticket? When was it created? Who created it? Any information that I have available is going to be listable for me and therefore searchable. And that way I can present any info back to anyone. If I only wanted to see tickets that were for level 1 support, I can break it down and show only the L1 tickets if that's what I want to see. And of course, if I choose to group based on some other field like title instead of my priority, or maybe based on status, I can create the grouping based on that instead. Grouping by status. So any fields that I capture can be searched for, sorted on, or reported against, and provided as a means for you or your customers to be able to access the solution directly. And of course, be able to search previous current purchases for data fields, that really covers that issue. Developing a workspace to capture your procurement or any other process. Footprints can, of course, do procurement workspaces. It can do any others. I don't have a completed procurement workspace in my system at all, but I do have a workspace labeled procurement. So you can have a procurement workspace in your system if that's what you want, to start capturing information about things that you're purchasing, right? If you have specific procurement details that you'd need to capture, you could capture those and have that same ability to search through that information as deeply as you'd like. And of course, lastly, because no matter how many users you have of the system, right, Footprints can still keep track of them, can keep track of all the tickets, and customers as users in Footprints are free. Right? There is no charge for X number of customers. You can have as many as you want, 1 customer or 1 billion customers or anything in between, whatever you'd like. That means that anybody who submits tickets, whether it's me as a technician or an agent, or whether it's my customer needing to be able to see all their tickets that they've submitted on their home screen. Anybody can see any information that they need to be able to manage the status of their requests and see exactly where they are, right? These are in a request status, some of them are in progress, so our customers can quickly see the things that they've asked for and the things that they need. Now, to talk a little bit more about Footprints and its design, right? We talked about workspaces and said, hey, you know, we can have workspaces just like we used to have. But for those of you who are familiar with older versions of Footprints, you're probably noticing that I don't have this choice over here that says, hey, Administration Footprints, Administration Workspace or System. And I don't have the ability over here to say, hey, I'm in the Change Management Workspace. You're no longer taken to a specific workspace when you log into Footprints. You are taken to your own console, which is what I'm looking at here, which displays content from your own portal, which is what I'm looking at here, all the information across the top. Your console and portal allows you to interact with Footprints in the way that makes the most sense for you, depending on your role in the organization. So gone are the notions of having to drill into a workspace in order to create that type of ticket. Right. Before in Footprints, if I wanted to create a change request, I drilled into the change workspace by changing the workspace over here, and I said, hey, I want to make a new change request. Great, I could do that. I'm in the change workspace. But if I wasn't, then I wouldn't have the option to create a new change request. Right? I'd have to go to that workspace to do it. Now in Footprints, all workspaces, all the info you need to do your job is brought to you in your console, instead of you having to drill out to it in some other workspace or some other function in the product. So by centralizing the information, it allows everyone who interacts with the product to have access to only the info that they need, only the workspaces that they may need. And because I now don't have to drill into individual workspaces, notice that I can have all these tickets open on my screen at the same time and toggle back and forth between them. For those of you who are on earlier versions of Footprints who are on the call, and I know from some of your questions, many of you are, some of the challenges that you posed, many of you are, that means that you don't have this ability, right? If you open a ticket in your system, it is in the incident workspace. You want to open a fulfillment request, a different kind of service than break fix, right? It's not a break fix service like an incident, it's a fulfillment request. You would have to drill into your service request workspace to do that, but I can just build a new fulfillment request ticket right from here without having to leave the console. So Footprints really gives you hands-on ability to all your detail because it brings it back to you directly on your home screen, which is one of the major differences between the older versions of Footprints and the new one. Another big difference is try to bring your calendar up on your home screen like this while you still have tickets open. Right? Just an impossibility in your existing version of the product if it's not V12. So very, very robust capabilities for bringing the data that matters to you back to you. And you can even see today, according to me, it's 1:18 p.m., or at least it's 1:18 p.m. on the East Coast, where some of you are hailing from. All right, so if you've got another question out there, Rich, I'll be happy to take that and address it.
Oh, at this point, we have a plethora of questions here, Greg. We definitely struck a nerve here. All right, the next question, once again, I just want to remind you, David Thorpe, this is your question. Go ahead and email me at rich.longo@flycastpartners.com, and I'll be happy to send you out a token of our appreciation for your question. But David Thorpe wants to know about the customer service interface.
Sure. Well, as we started talking about earlier, Footprints, of course, allows your customers to interact with you either through email, right? So that means customers can email you. Note to self, do not email the fire department, right? If your hair is actually on fire, you're probably best off calling the fire department so that they can show up on site quickly. But you can always process tickets through email. Customers can, of course, still call you the way they currently do, or they can do a ninja move on you and appear out of a puff of smoke in the hallway and say, hey, can you do me a favor, right? And if you want to know more about that, please do sign up for our Fool series on the service desk. It's coming up on, of all things, April Fool's Day. Seems appropriate for that. But getting your customers access to the product means that they can log into Footprints. They can be provided with information about their tickets. You can also give them the ability, of course, to place requests either directly through the service catalog, and you can have more than one service catalog in Footprints so that folks have the ability to see different services, or you can parse that service catalog out so that even though we're slicing the same service catalog here, I'm just looking at it with different services available to the customer. So in this way, the right services can be presented back to the correct customer based on what you need them to see. These services can be the exact copies of the stuff you're using for your technicians, or it can be just a subset of those services so that the customer doesn't see things like server services, even though our techs have the ability to gain access to it. When our customers open a ticket in Footprints, you can see we've kept this extremely minimal, right? Give me a subject, give me a description, almost as if they're filling in an email. You can certainly add whatever detail you would like to this form. This is absolutely just an out-of-box form that was created by the system on its own. If you want to have your customers check off a bazillion checkboxes or pick a bunch of drop-down fields or what have you, you can include any information back to your customers that you would like. We recommend from a good practice perspective to keep things minimal so that your customer isn't daunted, you know, by the task and say, ooh, I don't think I want to fill that form out. I'm just going to call them. So if you're trying to drive your customers to self-service, keep the portal as simple as possible. But whether they're requesting a specific service or whether they're doing a service request as an incident, right, or a service request as a standard service request, notice that Footprints is keeping track of these with separate numbering schemas, even though the ticket information may look very similar between the two of them, right? They're both being routed to a separate workspace behind the scenes. So your customer can be given access to your service catalog, as we said. They can be given access to see their own tickets on their home screen. They can be given access to any information you would like to bring back, right? In this case, we just happen to be linking to BMC's detail, so it's some streams from BMC, or you can just scroll that right out of the way so that folks don't have to see that little dashboard in the way at all. Customers can pull up their own tickets from here very easily and see the information about that particular ticket or any other tickets that they might have. If I click on this particular incident record for email not working, we'll bring that up from the customer. Very simple detail. But our customers can, of course, then check on the status of their tickets from here, can check on any tickets that they've submitted in any workspace you've given them access to, but also, of course, have the ability to leverage that service catalog. And if you've chosen, they have the ability to leverage the knowledge base. Now, knowledge in Footprints has really grown substantially from earlier iterations. In earlier versions of Footprints, knowledge came with a workspace. So if you had a workspace, you automatically had a knowledge base because it was a part of every workspace. But that meant that every workspace got one, whether you used it or not, right? And that also meant if you wanted to build a knowledge base, you built a workspace, and then you put the knowledge in that workspace, right? Even if you never took a ticket in the workspace at all for any kind of request. Now in Footprints, you build a knowledge base container independent of the workspace. You can have as many knowledge base containers as you would like. Each of these containers and every container in Footprints is actually managed through its own set of workflows, its own set of authorizations if you need to have your KB articles approved before they're published, so that you can present your customers with an easy to see, I think a much easier to use set of knowledge categories that allows them to drill in and find the information that they need, right, about Word or about any other software package that you might have, so that knowledge articles can be brought up. And that means that fields inside of your knowledge article, including expiration fields, etc., can be used as management sources for, hey, these are due to expire. Let's make sure that we treat these knowledge-based articles with respect and update them as appropriate, right? So that stale knowledge isn't existing out there. Unapproved knowledge doesn't exist if you're passing your knowledge through an approval loop before you publish it. But Footprints lets you manage all of that directly in knowledge-based containers now. In fact, that really provides a great segue for me to talk about some of the Administrivia. For those of you familiar with the old version of Footprints, this is completely foreign to you because this doesn't look anything like administration in the other version of the product. Everything you could do in the system admin is here. This is all of system administration. Everything that you can do inside of Workspaces or other functions like the CMDB, the address book, is all done through the container management here, including knowledge bases, right? Or service portfolios to manage those service requests, or to manage those particular requests in your service catalog, which are set up in your service portfolio as well. You can also use your service portfolio, by the way, to manage your service level agreements and service level targets, including full threshold capabilities, so that when you create a service level target, and if I have an opportunity, I'll show you that at the end of the discussion, you can set particular thresholds for them so that triggers and alerts happen only when those thresholds are breached. But maintaining knowledge is the same as maintaining anything inside of Footprints. All containers in Footprints are now managed identically. So if I go to manage my knowledge base, you can see that I have created one container here. It's my out-of-the-box knowledge management area. You can see that I have a form here to manage knowledge articles, a workspace. And you can see that I have agent version and customer version of this. If we were accessing knowledge from a handheld device and I wanted to create a dumbed-down version of that page for management on a handheld device, I could. I do not need to. Let me be clear on that. You don't have to have a special app for this. You don't have to have a special dumbed-down page, because folks can access the full-on website directly from inside the product with no issues at all. Scales perfectly fine, so they're not, unable to see it for some reason. It works fine on your iPad or Android device or whatever you happen to have. But what that means is every single one of these containers has its own fields that are controllable for it, has its own business rules that you can create for it. And when we talk about business rules a little more detail in a minute, you'll see that there are multiple business rules that can manage workflows. Even has its own workflow processes, and these are visual workflows. So when we talk about change management in a little bit, we'll talk about that. Each and every single knowledge container has its own set of life cycles that can be managed. So this really takes the concept of workspaces to another level, right? It's like workspaces on steroids, because now individual containers can manage configuration items, or can manage knowledge items, or can manage service items, or can manage our workspaces, as we talked about before. Many of us are familiar with that concept. So I'm going to go back over here to workspaces, and I want you to notice I have a few of them here, right? Legal, project, change management, IT services. If I drill into IT services, notice that I have all these what are called record definitions in Footprints lingo now. These record definitions are workspaces, exactly what they are. They are workspaces with full workflow, full workspace management capabilities that you would expect in Footprints, except they all live underneath one workspace container called IT services. So what workspaces have morphed into in Footprints is really the ability to have a workspace living underneath, or multiple workspaces living underneath a given workspace container. And inside of that container, I can manage how these workspaces relate to each other. I can manage whether or not they share data with shared fields. So if you have fields that contain common information that you want to appear on all these workspaces, you'll have access to them as a part of Form Designer in Footprint. You can set email templates that all of these workspaces in this container will have access to use, and any more in Footprints now in V12. Creating these is super easy. So if I'm just saying, hey, in my facilities workspace, I want to edit the email for ticket change notifications, and I'd like to make some modifications to this. Notice that the email is created right here inside of the product, and if I really wanted to make some changes to it, I could say, well, yeah, this is nice, but I would like to put an underline under there that's red or something, right, or a different color, or change the entire font to red, whatever I'd like to do. So making changes to my information in Workspaces has grown tremendously, including the ability to manage emails. But when I get into individual record definitions, I can now manage what goes on in my incident form. Right? And in old versions of Footprints, the customer and the agent form were the same. The difference was you had fields on the form, the one form you had, that were either customer-facing or agent-facing. Right? So you could decide the customers would get the negative, they would see the things that the agents didn't see typically, or vice versa. Except in some cases, agents had to see those fields. So what you would have is kind of double jeopardy, right? A category for customers, and then one that agents could see too, which was really a different one, but they could see the customers one as well. Just very confusing. Now you can simply say, look, my customer version of the form contains fields that are not going to be on my agent version, like the I can't field. If I want to display information back, I can't use an application, I can't connect to the internet, I can't. I can give my customers access to this field and never have it show up anywhere on my agent form ever. I don't have to confuse my agents with that information. And vice versa, I don't have to have all the detail from my customer forms, or my agent forms, placed on the customer form. Because by drilling into the form for agents, you can see I have access to lots of information, right? Lots of different fields, which are not going to be visible on that customer form. So all of this information can be quickly modified in Footprints. I'm just going to grab a field here real quick and drag it out for the sake of discussion. If I want that created on field to be right here on my form, I can just drag and drop the created on field to there. If I want that to be a slightly wider field, no problem. I've just made it wider. If I want to add a new section to the form, I just created a brand new section for capturing data. And I'm going to type. You're going to watch me. Isn't that fun? New section. I can decide how many columns this section can be, up to 6 columns across. And that means when I drag new information out to this section, whatever I've called it, I can now have 6 columns worth of information to capture all the details that I want to. I can create whatever fields that I want. These are just fields that I had already created for me. You can build any additional fields that you would like, drag them out onto the form exactly like this. No interaction with the database required. So extremely potent capability when it comes to designing forms and then giving that access to your customer. Whoop, I don't want you to see maps. Giving that access to your customer so that the customer can then see that information on their home screen and take advantage of it in that way. So moving right along, we've talked about some of the differences and some of the similarities in Footprints. Let's talk about some of the actual use capabilities maybe. Rich, you have another question off the list that customers may have asked about this?
Yes, actually, Connie Wilson. And Connie, once again, go ahead and send me your information. I'll be happy to send something out to you. A form to create parent ticket that once submitted automatically created child tickets that are assigned to different groups. We call it HR workflow.
Okay. And that's a great use for Footprints, actually. Many customers love the fact that Footprints creates what are called master and sub-tickets. So a master ticket acts as that parent ticket with multiple sub-tickets underneath. And those are all distributed, right? Distributed workflow. They go to different people. That they may happen in a specific order, but different people in the end are the ones that are working on all of those, and we want to be sure all those steps are done. So if I go into my service request form here, I haven't filled anything out on this. I'll roll my dashboard up out of the way just to make it a little easier from a real estate perspective. If I want to pick from one of our templates, we just happen to have, and this is out of box, by the way, a new hire template. That new hire template is going to populate this ticket automatically when I choose it, and it's going to have all the information filled in about the new hire, right? Notice that it says it's going to create these tickets, providing a computer, providing a mobile phone, and providing a badge. Those are the bits of info that Footprints will create for me automatically when I save this ticket. And it's going to do that inside of my linked area, right? So my linked tickets are going to get a linked set of subtasks created automatically once I create this ticket. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Now, if there were bits of information missing on my form, Footprints would have prompted me for it, anything that was mandatory. If you want to have your customer contact information about who's calling for this service filled in, go ahead and do that. I'm just going to pick this. By the way, this can be linked to your Active Directory system. Multiple Active Directory domains are supported, unlike the way it used to be, where you had the choice of 2. You can have multiple Active Directory domains for this now, so very flexible. I'm just going to go ahead and pick me as the person that this is linked to. But in the end, when I go over to linked tickets, you can see that Footprints has created for me the ticket to activate the badge for a new hire, the ticket to order and configure the supported workstation, and to order and configure a mobile phone for the new hire. And I can pull, of course, any of these tickets up right from here if I want to, unlink them, look at them, work on them, do whatever I need to. But this means that whoever is assigned to these tickets does not have to be the same people that are assigned to work on my main ticket. I can have different assignees based on the nature of the service for each one of these service requests, and you can have as many of them as you want. We just happen to create 3, but you can have as many of those as you would like really inside the system so that you can then capture and record that info and manage that new hire or any other process that's either linear or distributed, right? Either linear, one person does one thing, one ticket does it, or distributed, multiple people do multiple things in order to make this come to life. So I think that covers the HR workflow discussion, which is excellent. Thanks very much. Now, do you have another question, maybe, Rich? I'll be happy to cover off on another one.
I have so many questions, it'll make your head spin, Greg. The next question is Thomas Carroll. Thomas, reach back out to me, rich.longo@flycastpartners.com, so I can reward you for your question. Ease of configuration and use and security is what Thomas wants to know about.
Well, Thomas, thanks for the question. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on, and the reason I took you behind the scenes to show you how the sausage is made in footprints, right? Kids, shield your eyes. You don't want to see how the sausage is built. But one of the reasons I did that is because footprints prides itself on having always been codeless, right? So the ability to create functionalities inside of footprints and do things with it, whether that's, configuring a new workspace, creating a brand new workspace from scratch, like I could do right here, create and publish a new workspace if I wanted to. It'll be empty. I can add my own details to it, or even creating one from a template. Everything about the product is designed so that it is easy to use. If I like my incident workspace and I say, hey, I want to copy this, make another one and call it something different and give it to a different customer of mine, then I can just say, hey, let's copy this workspace, make another copy of it exactly. Footprints will create a new copy of that. Or if I wanted to export this as a template, then when I create a new copy of this workspace, it'll be imported from a template. And that means if I built a workspace on my system right here in front of you, I could choose to export this workspace as a template file, and then you could go in to Footprints and say, I would like to build me a workspace. So if I create a new one, I could just create one from a template and then tell Footprints to look for that template file that I just created it from, even though I built it on my system and you imported it into yours. So that means that when BMC gives you your free copy of Footprints to run in your test environment, you can create all the workspaces that you want in tests and then import that information right from Footprints to say, yeah, I built it the way I'd like. I'd like that to be now moved over into my production environment. It does not bring the tickets, right? But that's okay, because when I develop and test, I probably don't want the tickets in my test environment anyway. It just brings the construct of the workspace, including all rules, including all auto assignments, and including things like workflows. So that information also gets brought over, whether you're managing change or managing any other process inside. Now, when it comes to creating these workspaces and giving people access to them, that's the reason why we have rules, right? Footprints allows us to control access just like it used to, right? For those of you used to the old version of the product, it lets you control access like it used to. But the difference is now in Footprints, each container, of course, has its own access level. There are some default roles per container. But if I look at my human resources workspace and say, hey, I want to edit the manager's access and see what kind of capability they have, from a security perspective, those folks would only be able to see HR requests. Notice they don't have access to anything else. I can't give them access to anything else even from here. I can decide what they're capable of doing in that HR workspace. Can they view tickets? Can they create them? Can they copy them? Can they edit them? Can they delete them? What can they do? And if I wanted to, I could just say, no, you can't do anything. So you don't even get to edit the tickets. That won't help you much, right? You have a role that you can't even view. So yeah, I'll let you view them. There you go. As a manager, you can now view those tickets. We can even control access and security right down to the field level. So every field in my HR workspace can be controlled. This is brilliant because that means your HR folks do not have to worry about the wrong people having eyes on HR data that shouldn't have eyes on HR data, right? And it also means that fields like, salaries or any other information you're capturing for your people do never have to be exposed to anyone, right? Only the right folks can see that detail. Only the people you've given access to can see it. So you have the ultimate ability and the ultimate control in Footprints to be able to manage who can see what, in addition to being able to do all of it through a point-and-click interface. And that includes being able to access your workflows for that workspace, right? And workspaces are very unique, as we talked about, to Footprints, but workflows are also very unique because each workspace can have as many as necessary, and each is going to be needed for managing a particular kind of request inside of that workspace. So, Rich, I don't know if you have any questions out there that might discuss specific workflows or anything, but that'd be great if you do.
We do.
Segue into that.
We do. We have Brian Peso. I believe that's how you pronounce your last name, Brian. I apologize if it's not. Go ahead and email me, Brian. I'd love to send you out something. He wants to know about the change management workflows.
Oh, okay. Brilliant. So change management, of course, is one of the things that you can use in Footprints. And when I constructed my stuff out of box, I just built it from a template, and I built all of this stuff. Actually, this is out-of-box functionality. Just to take you back over here very quickly, you can see that when I created my Footprint system, I chose Create. I said IT service management, and notice that it builds all of these containers for me. Change management, everything. So the stuff we've been talking about is stuff that Footprints constructed out of box. Now, I did add the cool looking icons to the knowledge base. The knowledge base or icons that comes with are just a little gear. You replace them with a picture of your own choosing, right? So I did add that. But the rest of the stuff we've been talking about so far today has really been built out of this out-of-box functionality, creating those workspace containers. And it did this in about 6 minutes. So very, very quick to get that done. That included change management, of course. Now, the ability to create a change record, we've already talked about. If I go back to my home screen, you can see I have my change request open. And for those of you who are working in old versions of Footprints, this is one of those things that you cannot do. You cannot say, hey, I'm going to go administer something. And, oh, by the way, I'm also going to go back and work on that change request I was working on, too. Right? Because the change request would be gone if you chose administration workspace up here because you've left the screen. But I can still administer all I want to from here with my change ticket still being wide open and ready to use. So inside of change management, you can see I have a change request workspace. I can create brand new workspaces in here if I want to, or surveys for managing changes. I'll just drill into my change request workspace. I have the same forms. And for those of you, again, who are used to old versions of Footprints or who are laying your eyes on it for the first time, you're probably noticing that all of this stuff is the same no matter which container I'm in. I still have the ability to manage my stuff the same way. So what they've done is really unify and centralize the capability of management and administration of Footprints, making it easier to use. But one of the new features that they added is the ability to manage multiple workflows. And change management is a good example of that. Change management, of course, is typically things that people think of when they are managing changes to their IT infrastructure. And those things in ITIL standards come in 3 flavors, right? Emergency stuff or break-fix work. Something's broken, I have to fix it because it's on fire, I need a change. Here's the emergency change, please go fix that, right? Emergency changes, by the way, are not poor planning on your part equals an emergency on mine. So don't misconstrue them for that. Use a different type of change. But emergencies are really there for, this is break-fix, house on fire, go put it out with a change. Normal workflows, and of course, for standard changes, the things that are highly repeatable that may need just a single approver, if any. When we look at these workflows, I'm going to look at the emergency workflow first. You can see it's a picture, right? I can drag these little guys around if I want to. The lines drag, kind of like Visio does, really. These pictures are the workflow. There is no code behind the scenes here, no code. This is simply the workflow is the picture is the workflow. If I cut this little line here between implemented and assigned out, it means the ticket would no longer be able to go back and forth between them. If I draw a line between assigned out and closed, it means that Footprints would allow me to move the ticket from assigned out directly to that closed status. I'll just move this out of the way a little bit. Yes, I know, I'm not crossing them. It doesn't want you to cross the streams and reconnect things you've already connected. But you can see I can now move directly to closed from assigned out as well. If I don't want that to happen, I can just choose to remove those cells. But each workflow is truly a picture. And that means that if I want or need a very complex workflow for managing my changes that go through a normal hopper, you can see I have a lot of different steps in this workflow, right? Rejected steps, authorized steps, assigned out steps, built, testing, scheduled, implemented, under review, closed. None of those are part of the emergency workflow because that's a fast-tracked ticket, and this is not. This is your normal one. So any kind of criteria you want can be used to determine these workflows because Footprints lets you set your own defining criteria. And the defining criteria in this case is really simply a matter of saying, hey, what did you pick for a change type on the change request? If you picked normal, then this will go through the normal workflow. If you pick emergency, it will go through the emergency workflow. This is just one field. You can have Footprints measure against as many fields as you want. If these 5 fields contain these 5 values, then send it through that workflow. If this request costs more than $5,000, then send it to Bob for authorization. If it doesn't, send it through our regularly scheduled workflow already in progress. So that means you can use this change authorization functionality, not just in change management, but in any workspace in Footprints where you need someone to say, I approve this message. Right? Any workspace in Footprints can leverage this. And that means, going back over here, if I said, hey, under manager review is an approval state, and I've just told Footprints this is an approval state I already have and approved and rejected. I don't need Footprints to add it, although it's being helpful and asking me if I would like to. Now it says manager review. I can decide, well, where does it go next? Well, next could be rejected, but that's not the approval state, so we'll make that the CAB review, and rejected is the not so approved state. And of course, if I added a new status except for rejected here, I could add expired and then pass the ticket over to that status from manager review as well. Maybe they took too long. I can pick how many people need to review the request. So that means from anyone, whether customers or agents or managers or anybody in the system has access to be able to authorize requests of any kind, change management requests or not. So I can decide how many voters there are, whether they're system admins or managers or agents or anyone. But I can also pick from teams. Hey, everybody on this team has to say yes or no. Or how many people are maybe going to be picked based on dynamic information. So maybe I want to know based on the submitter or the submitter's supervisor's supervisor or the implementer assigned supervisor's supervisor who has to sign off. Footprints can leverage all of that information, including fallback voters. So if somebody doesn't vote, then you have someone for the change to fall back to that they can pick up and actually take that action. So in this way, you can very quickly and easily, without code, decide, hey, who's going to approve? When does it happen? What does the workflow look like? When does that get evoked? All without code. So that lets you manage changes and any other kind of request in Footprints that requires an authorization to happen. So hopefully that cleared up that question. We'll move forward on a couple of the other questions that you might have, Rich, because I know we're rounding the bend in our last 15 minutes here. So we have time maybe for a couple more.
We do have
one more.
Yeah, we do have a ton of questions, and I want to point out Nicholas Getchell. He's asked quite a few questions today, but Nicholas, we're going to go ahead and use your first question you asked about upgrading to V12 because about 50% of our audience kind of has the same question that you do. Nicholas, go ahead and email me at rich.longo@flycastpartners.com. I'd love to send you a token of our appreciation for your question, but Greg, what about upgrading to V12?
Well, lots of people ask us this as we're engaging them as well for services that we provide, et cetera, to be able to get you over to V12. So let me give you this in an encapsulated nutshell. Right? Version 12 is really a different animal. And for those of you who are used to old versions of the product, I think you can see that now that we've talked about a little Footprints lingo here and shown you around inside of the product a little bit. Clearly in our hour format, I don't have enough time to be able to go through every function of the product, so my apologies in advance for not being able to take every question or dive into every function of Footprints. It is very, very potent and powerful now, especially under this new version. But because it no longer uses its base code of Perl, right? It used to be a Perl tool. Now it's all done in Java. Because it no longer uses any of that base, there is no upgrade in place anymore. Now, this is one of the things that really gave Numara fits when Numara still owned the product, because they wanted it to be upgradable like all the other versions were, and they knew that there was just no way you were going to lay, JavaScript over the top of Perl and have everything magically be uplifted. So what they did instead was, and BMC picked up this torch after they acquired Numara, what they did instead was they created something called the migration tool. Now, for those of you on the call who have used it, maybe not recently, at 12.1, they did officially release it in its first iteration. Its first iteration, the migration tool does two things. One, it assesses your system to be sure that you are on the most recent version of Footprints, 11.6.05. Right, it'll check for that. The other thing that it's going to do is it's going to check to see if you've injected any JavaScript or made any changes to a file behind the scenes in Footprints called mrlocalDefs. Basically, if you've done anything to Footprints outside of the graphical user interface, right? If you have not done your changes through administration workspace or administration system, then the advisor is going to catch those changes and say, I cannot migrate stuff out of this workspace because it's not base code. I'm not changing the base code of Footprints, so since I don't have that as a reference, I can't work. But if you do, if it comes back clean and says, look, we didn't find any issues, you're on the right version, you haven't changed Perl or something behind the scenes in Footprints causing us to break that migration process, then what the migration manager itself does is it will take your workspaces, it will bundle up the shell of the workspace, and it will then export that as an XML file, much in the same way that we did it here on our discussion, right? I could import an XML file, I could export an XML file. These in Footprints V12, when they're exported and imported, contain everything from business rules to workflow processes to the whole 9 yards. But because of the vast differences between version 12 and version 11 under the hood, they were really only able to get it to translate, at least in its current iteration, all of the information about the shell of that workspace. So that means the fields that are on the form, right? So when you create a workspace and you say, hey, I want to create a new incident record, basically, whatever is displayed on this form is what's going to come over in your migration. While it will also pull escalation rules, and it will list those out in the system, they will all be off. And what we have found is that escalation rules that trigger external actions, or Footprints takes an action against an external system, runs an external script, does something in Footprints Asset Core, those types of actions, those rules tend to not function after being migrated and would need to be tweaked and adjusted inside of V12. No other rules will carry over. The reason for that is, I don't know if you guys noticed, but gone in the administrative area is escalation rules. For those of you who are used to using Footprints, right, or have used it before, you no longer have escalation rules. You no longer have auto assignment rules. Everything is managed in a business rule, everything. So the ability to create business rules are now kind of like escalations, except they manage all your auto assignments, they manage all your notifications, they manage your SLA breaches through SLM type rules, they manage everything. So there is no one-to-one relationship between an auto field rule and anything in V12, therefore it doesn't migrate. There's no one-to-one relationship between auto assignment rules and anything in V12, therefore it doesn't migrate. And there is a close or reasonable relationship between escalations and those tickets that we see, or these rules that we see here, these business rules in Footprints. So it will bring them over. However, you may find some of them do not function as they were intended to, and they will all be turned off. This does not bring the data, right? Those tickets would have to be exported and then brought over into your new version of Footprints. Now, that method that I just described, leveraging the migration tool to assess your system and then to export it as XML, is for customers who are deeply, madly in love with their existing version of their workspaces to the point where they wouldn't change a thing even though they have a brand new toolkit through which to do it, right? They just want their new car to be exactly like their old car. If they could just, you know, copy and digitally print an old car on top of their new one, they would. So that is perfect for customers who love everything they have configured in Footprints V11 or earlier and would simply like that lock, stock, and barrel look to be brought over into Footprints V12. For us, and for many of the customers that we work with, they prefer the other mechanism, which is, hey, this is a new tool. This is a new product. And as such, there are new capabilities, as many of you have seen on the call, right, if you're familiar with older versions of Footprints. For those of you not, trust me, these are very new capabilities, right, new things that you can do that you just never were able to in Footprints before. That changes your design hand, right? It means you could do things differently. More than one occasion, George Lucas has said, I would love to refilm Star Wars now that I have the ability to do it with new special effects and new wizardry that he didn't have back in 1978 when he released the film, right? Well, this is your chance to be Lucas and refilm Star Wars. You now have a whole new palette in V12 to be able to take advantage of. And so literally all of the customers that we work with very few exceptions, have said, look, we'll go to V12, but we'll just do it as a V2.0. Right? We'll just recreate our workspaces in version 12 using the new design capabilities. So that's the other mechanism for getting there. Now, for those of you who are straddling the fence and say, yeah, but I have all this old data and I don't want to leave it in my old system, I would encourage you to leave it in your old system, to leave it in Footprints or wherever it lives so that you have access to it in its pristine state. Right? You don't have to export it. You don't have to bundle it up. You don't have to decide which fields. And most importantly, you don't have to come into your new version of Footprints and design a brand new workspace that looks just like your old workspace in order to house all those old tickets, right? But you can if you want to. So we've been recommending to customers, hey, leave it in your old system. BMC doesn't have any issue with you using that as an archival workspace in Footprints. For those of you not familiar with that, that just means it's read-only. You can only read data out of it. You can't create tickets in it. And then all the data is left there pristine. But if you want, you can create brand new workspaces in Footprints and create a workspace in the new version of Footprints to house your old data too, then we can certainly then provide assistance with getting that old data moved over, as well as assistance with getting you stood up in version 12. because the differences, as you see from an administration perspective, from a usability perspective, are simply vastly different, right? Nothing really looks the same, from its integration capabilities to its import capabilities, even the ability to import tickets into specific containers. And I know that many of you, in older versions of the product, if you wanted to import knowledge base articles, for example, that was a very difficult thing. Right? You can't just like aim it at a knowledge base article specifically. But now, if I choose to import tickets, I can decide which container I'm going to import them into, right? So where is the data going to go? I decide which workspace it goes into. I decide where it lives, and that means I can pick specific containers to import that data to. So you can certainly import tickets and information necessary inside of the product if you need to from your old system, but we have been recommending to folks leave it in its pristine state, because anytime you change versions of any product, I don't care if it's Microsoft Word, right, that you're working in, Word will come up and tell you, hey, they're going to be losing some fidelity here as you change versions. So exporting and re-importing ties your hands, and that you must have a new workspace in V12 to accommodate your old stuff. And if you wanted your production workspace in V12 to be new and improved, right, Star Wars shot with new technology, then you probably want to build a new workspace in it anyway. So now you've built two workspaces, one for the old stuff, one for the new, instead of just working on a single one. So getting over to Footprints really comes in a couple of flavors. The migration tool is one way to get there, but it doesn't migrate everything, right? All workflow will not come across, but it will migrate the construct of that workspace, the drop-downs, the field values, the names, your urgencies, your priorities, all that stuff will get migrated over. And that's perfect for customers who just love their existing workspace. But if you don't, and you want it to look different, then we recommend designing that information directly in V12. I want to touch very briefly, because we only have a minute here. I want to touch very briefly on Footprints reporting capability, because that's certainly been a sore spot with old versions of the product, but it has dramatically improved. Footprints lets you write reports on just about anything, right? Ticket management information, these are the canned reports or the metrics reports in old versions of Footprints. So you could measure average age or life cycle of tickets or see where they're at. You also have a new ability called a watch list that you didn't have before. Service portfolio, so that you can measure service level agreements or targets. And we do have the ability, of course, to create separate service level targets if you want to. And I'm going to very quickly show you what that looks like. Let me go into my service portfolio to build that. If I construct a new service level target, notice that my service level targets can now track specific thresholds based on a particular schedule. You can measure based on creation date, decide what the target values are going to be, right, 4 hours worth of time, and 70% of the tickets must be responded to in that time. So you can be very specific with this work target and SLA targets now, much more so than you ever used to be. But when you've created any kind of report in Footprints, the report's going to show up here in the list. And those reports can then be pulled up and edited if you want to, such that once I get over to it, my report is going to look like this in the report writer. This looks nothing like your old version. Also, unlike your old version, when you used to create searches, right, in Footprints advanced searches, you could save those search. And you could still do that. You could save those searches from your home screen. So from my home screen here, I still have the ability to create an advanced search, just like I used to. Except the big difference is now in Footprints, I can leverage those advanced searches as the basis for my reports. So before you had to recreate a search, right? So now I can leverage them for the basis of my reports, pull back the information from the tickets that I want, and I can do stuff in Footprints that I normally had to export to be able to do, like creating formula in my columns, right? Can't do that. Or create layout changes, or sort or filter my data, or group it by status or something. All of that ability is now inherent in Footprints, and the ability, of course, to output this thing as a PDF file if that's what I want to do. So if I would like to output either my charts as PDFs or the actual list of data that comes back, and you can see this is a selectable PDF. So I can quickly do it right from inside of the product. And that means I can print this or save it or do whatever I'd like to do also from right inside the product. So reporting in Footprints has also changed substantially, and it is much more robust than it used to be. So guys, on the whole, I just want to be able to say thank you for attending our session today. I know that we ran right up to the end of the hour, but I'm going to turn this back over to Mr. Richard Longo. Thanks for taking time out of your day. For those of you who had questions used, please contact Rich, and he'll get you his little prize, whatever he's going to give out. And you guys have a great rest of your afternoon, okay, and a great rest of your week. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you again, Greg. It was a great presentation. I appreciate the audience participation. And Cheryl Mack, Greg just touched on the answer to your question, so I'm going to give that one to you, Cheryl. Go ahead and send me your information. I'll be happy to send you out something because Greg did tackle your question about reports and the significant changes that have been made to reporting in Footprints. So I want to thank you for that. With everything being said, I want to encourage each of you to take a look at our website for additional information. Please, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to us at 844-FLYCAST. We'll be more than happy to address any questions that you have. You can also email me. If there's a question that you really wanted answered today that we didn't get to, go ahead and email me at rich.longo@flycastpartners.com. Those of you that we did answer questions for, please contact me. I would really love to send something out to you as a token of our appreciation for submitting your questions and us actually using it in front of everybody and their brother in North America today. So with that being said, I want the rest of you, all of you, please enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you again for attending another Flycast Partners presentation.
Mm-hmm.